To build anything that truly lasts, it takes time.
Has been a quarter of actually weak credit growth, declining net interest margins, declining profitability, and also overall increase in the overall gross NPA numbers and increase in the provisioning and slippages for overall banking sector. Let me start with the big banks, that is Axis Bank, HDFC and ICICI. If you look, Axis Bank had its own problem of technical adjustment which had actually resulted in the overall deterioration of its asset quality, overall increase in the slippages and provisioning on a YY basis and on a quarter-on-quarter basis. But even though they had their own technical challenges, the overall profitability growth, there was a degrowth, and the PPOP that showed a growth of around 14%. If you look at HDFC Bank, even there we have seen increasing the overall provision and slippages for the bank. Though the bank has created a floating provision, but even if you exclude the floating provision, the overall provisioning and slippages of the bank has actually gone up. If you look at the overall slippages for the bank, that has gone up by around 13.9% on a YOY basis, and on a quarter-on-quarter basis, it increased by around 20%. Now, if you look at ICICI Bank, even though the bank has shown good double-digit growth in its NII, profit, PPOP, and also the advances and deposit growth were in double-digit, but for this bank also, the overall provisioning and slippages have actually increased. Though the overall asset quality, that is the gross NPA of ICICI Bank, remained stable, but even there, the overall provisioning and slippages has shown an increase. Now let's come to the smaller banks, that is the RBL Bank, Bandhan, and the AU Small Finance Bank. If you look at here, the overall slippages have shown an increase from around 9% to around 89% to around doubling for some of the banks like Bandhan Bank. If you look in the overall provision, that has gone up by around 119% on a YOY basis, and also the overall slippages on a YOY basis, that has gone up by around 1.7 times, and the same case is for RBL Bank and AU Small Finance Bank. But here you can see one more thing, and that is the overall growth. The overall loans and advances growth, they have slipped down to single digit. For Bandhan Bank, it has been 6%, RBL, it has been around 9%. But here there is one more point of concern, and that is the deterioration in the net interest margin. For Axis, HDFC, ICICI, we have seen the overall deterioration in the net interest margin was little less. But here if you see for this bank, the overall deterioration in net interest margin, that is up by around 27 basis point to 38 basis point. So it is more near to half a basis point deterioration in the net interest margin that we have seen. So for small banks, it is the deterioration in net interest margin, the increasing slippages and provision, and also the overall reduction in credit growth that has not been looked upon as nicely by many of the brokerage house. Now, if you look at the PSU banks, there the overall gross NPA numbers are far better because the deterioration in the NPAs was not much as when you compare it to some of the private banks. But over here, if you look, the overall NII growth, that has been a point of concern because for Union Bank, for Central Bank, if you look, the overall NII growth that has gone down from around 3 to 4%, and also the net interest margin, they have gone down. For provisions, the overall provision has increased on a YOY basis, has decreased on a YOY basis, but the slippages have increased on a YOY basis for Union Bank and Central Bank both. So if you sum up the whole banking sector in this quarter, it has been a quarter of slow growth. The net interest margin, they have declined for big banks, small banks, all, but the deterioration has been more for the small banks. The overall asset quality has actually reduced more for private banks. For PSU Bank, the asset quality has been better, but if you look across the banking sector, the overall credit growth has reduced, provisioning and slippages have increased.
Thanks, Varun. That's the broader picture